I think this is an interesting time to be alive because what I've noticed just working with people is that although this is a great time, in content creation and being able to create and having access to certain things, it's also a hard time for a lot of people. You see, I think that I want to say around 80 to 90% of people that I work with often has negative feelings about themselves. So it doesn't matter what they do for a living. Like I said, I work with high performing professionals who are doing great in their career field, but even some of those persons have some negative thought patterns that has stopped them from achieving their boils down to a negative self-belief. And ultimately it boils down to negative thought patterns. And if a person really understood how these negative thought patterns impacts their daily life, I mean, it literally changes your brain chemistry. When we think about the term neuroplasticity, that just simply means we're not stuck with our brain. But again, oftentimes people only think that positive habits impact their brain, but negative thought patterns also impact your brain. Essentially, your brain and body is responding to the thoughts and feelings that you have. So, in this video, I want to discuss three of the nine negative thought patterns that I've come across that I feel like has impacted people mostly. All of our thoughts and emotions impact our brain. So all of our negative thoughts about ourselves, our unkind thoughts, our limiting beliefs, those impact how a person feels if we continuously have those type of thought patterns without correcting them. We've heard those persons who say things such as, well, this is just the way I am. And they continuously engage into negative thought patterns, always finding the negatives in situations. Essentially, this impacts how their brain and body operate. So chemically. So I want to discuss three of the non-negative thought patterns, and we'll break this up into three videos, so we can break these things down pretty good. So the first negative thought pattern is what we call all or nothing thinking. Okay, so this is essentially when a person thinks something is either all good or all bad. There's no room for space in the middle. It is a form of extreme thinking, and essentially, a person is either on one side of the spectrum. Let's use basketball. So let's say you train all off season, one aspect of your game to prepare for the season. You get going, you set goals on to win the championship. You fall a little short, right? An all or nothing mindset would think that this season is all bad, undermining all the other things that you've done, such as improved an aspect of your game. You grew even more in your ability to play the sport mentally strong. Maybe you should develop some powerful relationships with your teammates. Maybe you grew in your leadership. So essentially, you undermine all of those things, those aspects to your game, if you lose the championship. So these type of mindsets are typically very result driven and have somewhat of a perfectionist mindset. The second is always thinking. This kind of happens when a person thinks an experience always happens to them. It can be things like always and never, right? I never get anything good. Nothing ever happens good for me. Bad things always happen to me. So essentially, always a negative thinking. There again is no space in the middle. Another example of this would be, let's say you are getting ready for an exam and getting ready for an exam or a test, and you consider yourself to be a bad test taker. We're already planting the seed in our mind that I'm not going to perform well on the test. So when that experience happens, you will say things like, this always happens to me. I'm not a good test taker. And that anxiety, that thought pattern comes with not only comes with a thought, but it comes with an emotion. We feel very strongly about this experience. So what happens is we've literally created the experience once we start taking the exam, and once our body goes into a form of anxiety or a form of stress, getting nervous, and we're overthinking the situation, we're going to get the results because of that thinking. The third negative thought pattern is focusing on the negative. This type of thought pattern happens when a person only sees the negative in the situation, right? Let's use, for example, content creation. Let's say you posting content videos, or you posting YouTube videos or TikTok videos, and you're starting to build up a small following. And now you're getting likes, and now you're getting comments. Let's say you have 10 comments. 8 of those comments are extremely positive, saying, keep up the good work. We really appreciate the information. You're giving us value. The 2 of the comments are negative, saying, we don't like the comment. You're this is a waste of time. I've been wasting time in my life, whatever the case may be. A person who only sees the bad in situations would bypass the 8 positive comments that they had and focus all of their attention on the 2 negative. And they will place their value of their video based on those 2 comments. So they'll say things such as, my content is terrible. So look, we all have been a victim of negative thinking. I've also found myself in a rut and having negative thought patterns. So we have to look at our brain and mind like a garden. And if we're not aware of what's going in our garden, weeds have the potential chances of growing. But if we get to the point where we are aware and we are focused on providing ourselves with healthy thought patterns, then we can plant beautiful fruits and vegetables so that we can have a beautiful garden of a mind. Okay? So let's talk about a few different ways that we can improve some of these things. When we think of negative thought patterns, oftentimes we see no balance, right? When I'm working with an athlete, one of the things that we talk about is, I don't want them to think that I'm okay with losing, or I want you to be okay with losing. We can absolutely set a goal on winning, but if we don't win, we cannot undermine all the other areas of success, because if winning and losing is the evidence of peak performance, then essentially we miss so many opportunities to build up on growth. Okay. So one of the first things we need to do when we're thinking about negative thought patterns, we need to gain awareness. How can we gain awareness of our thoughts? When we think of meditation, meditation is becoming aware of. When we sit down in meditation and we start to focus on our breath, essentially we're trying to place our attention on our breath and slow down our thoughts. You hear a lot of people say, I can't meditate because my mind is thinking. But that's the thing. Meditation is not a can or a can't. It's more of an act of training the brain. So if a lot of people ask, okay, Chris, how long do you meditate for? Do you meditate for 20 minutes, 30 minutes? There have been times where I've meditated for 30 minutes, but then there also have been times where I had 3 to 5 minutes of intentional breathing, and essentially what's happening in the brain is we're trying to promote a nice state of calmness, of alpha brain waves. And what alpha allows us to do, alpha is like the brain state that allows us to be ready to shift into alertness, which is some of your lower betas, and then slip into more of the visualization or imaginary space, or dreamy like state in your theta. So alpha is a nice calmness. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to work on our breathing and calm down our mind. But in the act of breathing, we want to become aware of our thoughts. So we're not trying to stop our thoughts. Thoughts are going to happen. So what we're actually trying to do is to become aware of our thoughts when we're breathing and we're working on meditation. Another thing we want to do is place our attention with intention on our thoughts. Okay, we want to become aware of the thoughts we're having. So if we find ourselves in a negative thought pattern, and I find myself saying, oh man, something happening. Man, this always happens to me. The moment I catch myself, I want to become aware of those thoughts. When I catch myself, I need to change that thought pattern immediately. Okay? It's not about being perfect. It's not about never having a negative thought pattern. It's about training our brain to have these new patterns. And the best way to do that is to become aware of the thoughts that we're actually having. A lot of times people are not as aware as they think of their negative thought patterns. They think they just think this way. And I sit in conversations all the time just observing people, the way that they talk. And oftentimes the way that they talk is a detriment to their brain and body. You'll never hear me say, and I just say that, but you, and this is true. I don't say that I'm getting old. I don't say it. I don't say I don't place my attention on getting old at all. And then what happens is when you start placing your attention on getting old, and then you start, oh, you've heard people say, oh man, I'm so old. I'm too old to do that. Too No. I'm gonna move this body. I'm gonna work out. I'm gonna go to the gym. I'm gonna play basketball. I'm gonna play flag football. I'm gonna wrestle. I'm gonna do all the things that I did when I was young. Because young is a mentality. Of course, there are going to be some physical changes in my body, but you will never hear me say that I'm getting old. Okay. So the thing why I'm bringing that up is because we want to be aware of our thoughts. We want to be aware of our thoughts. So if I have a thought pattern, if I have a thought pattern that says, man, I'm always messing up. This always happened to me. I can stop and say, you know what? This has happened to me sometimes, but I'm also going to change the thought pattern. What can be learned in this moment so that this doesn't happen to me again? Okay. Um, so once we started finding balance within our thought patterns, we can find a little level of success in changing the way that we think. Um, if we find ourselves, if we're one of those persons who's always finding the negative, we want to find the positive in situation, right? What you'll hear me say all the time, what happens to me is for my greater good. So that what that is saying is in each of the situations that I'll be in, I'll find myself in, I'm going to find something that can be learned from the experience. And when you look at it from a learning experience, then you can change the dynamics. A lot of the problem that the people that I serve and work with, a lot of it is their perspective of the problem, the way they see the problem. If you can change the way you see it, then you can change the problem. But you have to first start seeing things in a positive light. A lot of persons sometimes have trouble with those people who find things positive, can always find a positive. Things ain't always positive. You've heard people. No, things can absolutely be positive. Everything that happens to me is for my greater good. It's that simple. Put that in the comment box. If you stay to the video to this particular point, put that in the comment box. Everything that happens to me is for my greater good. And when you start seeing things in that matter, you start learning from all the experience. What is said to be negative, you start thinking like, ooh, when I get on the other side of this particular problem, I'm going to grow. I'm going to be at another level. You start seeing things different. That's the thing. A lot of people that I work with just don't find any value in themselves. And then when you start really breaking down, what's happening, you hear it in their language. You hear the negative thought patterns. It's just like, man, and then you're trying to change it, and it can get a little upsetting by overly correcting a person because some people just want to vent. They just want to talk about the problem. But the more we talk about the problem, the more the problem gets reinforced, which is a negative thought pattern. So we really want to get to the point where we become aware. Meditation helps do that. And then we want to start, you know, every time we catch ourselves, every time we get a moment where we hear ourselves say a negative thought pattern, it can be true, but change it to a more positive perspective, a more forward going perspective. Okay? Do me a favor. Get in the comment section. Put in there some things you want me to talk about, whether it's mental health, brain health, motivation, self-improvement, family, any of those things, put in the comment section. And then also do me a favor, hit that like button. That like button does help get the message out to the masses. It allows us to get out further because it says you like the content. I like to put this part at the end because the people who stay to this point enjoyed the message. So they'll subscribe or like and do all those things. Okay. So also subscribe to the channel. That helps us grow the nation. Okay. Peace.